Lines will be muted through the webinar. Each individual, when they sign on as a speaker today, will turn their cameras on. I want to go ahead and take a moment to introduce our facilitator for today's workshop, Andrea Darr, who is the director for the West Virginia Center for Children's Justice. Andrea Darr works to promote and support a statewide trauma-informed response to child maltreatment and children's exposure to violence at the West Virginia Center for Children's Justice. Housed as a part of the Crimes Against Children unit at the West Virginia State Police, the center streamlines resources and minimizes duplicative efforts to address challenges, barriers, gaps, and needed improvement in working child maltreatment cases. The center includes the West Virginia Children's Justice Task Force and the West Virginia Handle with Care Initiative. Before devoting her work full-time on children's initiatives, Andrea served as the coordinator of Victim Witness Services for the West Virginia Prosecuting Attorneys Institute from 2005 to 2015. In that capacity, she coordinated with prosecution-based victim witness assistant programs, as well as community-based programs to improve their collective knowledge concerning available resources and information to establish a bridge between local, state, and government and federal agencies regarding victim services. Andrea has also worked in direct service with victims of crime, violence, and abuse while serving as the victim liaison for Kanawha County Prosecuting Attorney's Office. Just a reminder that for all people, if you didn't get on the sign-in sheet, please relax, enjoy the sessions workshop as I hand it over to Andrea. And although she can't see us, please welcome her this morning. Thank you, Andrea. Take it away.
Thank you, Melody. Good morning, everybody. Hope everyone's safe and well. Welcome to this town hall meeting with Connectors for West Virginia Kids, keeping kids safe and well. Many of you know about the Handle with Care program and the work that we've been doing. And when all of this COVID-19 hit and schools closed down, we realized that the mandated reports were slowing down, the Handle with Care notices were slowing down, that kids were probably in very isolated places without a whole lot of eyes on them. And we wanted to brainstorm about how we could reach children in hard places. So that's why I'm here today, because we started a Handle with Care brainstorming session to try to figure out what people were doing to reach kids in hard places. So today we have a series of about 7 panelists that are going to tell you from their perspective what they're doing to reach kids. One thing we have done with Handle with Care, I don't know if you follow us on social media, we have really started pushing the word to please continue to send the Handle with Care notices. Law enforcement, I guess when everything shut down, they thought the notices weren't needed, but in fact, those notices go to essential school staff that are connecting with kids in all kinds of ways. You're going to hear about that from Cabell County in just a minute. But and this has been a great learning curve for us about what to do in the summer when kids are out. We really didn't have a good plan for that Handle with Care. But we're starting to figure out really great ways to reach kids. I want to ask you before I bring on our first panelist, please, in your communities, contact your law enforcement and encourage them to continue to send those notices. They're so vitally important. But if they hear it from you, they're going to hear it. So please do that. And we are on social media having law enforcement do little video blurbs to remind other law enforcement officers to continue to do that. Our first panelist today that I want you to hear from is from Cabell County. Ms. Kelly Watts serves as the Assistant Superintendent of Instruction and Leadership, a position she's held for the last 3 years. And before that, Mrs. Watts served as the Director of RESA 3 in Cabell County. Ms. Watts, can you join us and share with us some of the things that you all are doing in Cabell County to connect with kids?
Good morning, everyone. And I'm going to start a PowerPoint, so bear with me as I share my screen. Okay, you see it, Keith? Alrighty. So when March 13th happened. We all went into a mode of what we traditionally called our non-traditional instructional day. We had been, starting to prepare for possibilities of COVID and what the results could look like. We also were going to be facing spring break. We had a week and then we were going on spring break. So our hope was always that we would come back to school, but we were trying to prepare worst case scenario. And the very first thing oh, wait a minute, I just pulled up the wrong PowerPoint. Hang on, people, I'm sorry. That's what you get for not paying attention to what you chose. We had the right one up first. Let's see. I need to, there. Well, that was my template you're seeing. Let's see.
Yeah, we tested this just a few minutes ago and it worked fine. So just take your time, Ms. Watts, and pull that up. They have put together a series of slides with some photos to show you all how they're connecting with kids in West Virginia in Cabell County. And I was so impressed right off the bat with what you were doing. I've had communication with our Handle with Care coordinator in Cabell County, and I believe they have about 12,000 kids in Cabell County, and they have reached them all. They have connected with all those kids, but just a few, which is just amazing. So once we get this up, you'll hear about how they are connecting with those kids.
Yeah, what's going on here? It did, hang on.
The reason I focused on Cabell County is I heard about the fact that in Cabell County, there were a lot of children that couldn't connect with their teachers in their schools because they had no Wi-Fi. And I'm not sure where I read it, but I found out that Cabell County actually outfitted 12 or 15 school buses, parked them in isolated areas, and they were unmanned school buses, but kids and families could drive up, park their cars near the school buses, and connect to Wi-Fi from 9 to 4 every day. They had access to Wi-Fi to do their schoolwork, to get on the internet. So that was really, really an innovative thing to do. And they did it very, very quickly.
There it is. Here it is.
There we go.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you, Andrea. So one of our first focuses that when we sat down as a cabinet to meet was feeding students was going to be our top priority. We take great pride in the fact that we feed all students regardless of social economical situations. And we know, especially because March 13th was a Friday, making sure that our students had meals when they went home as many of our backpack ministries. So that was immediate. On Monday morning, we had our plan in place to start feeding with over 40 some sites, and our first feeding location to prepare the food was at the central office, and we started out at 5,000 students. It quickly grew to 7,000. We added a second feeding prep site at Barbersville Middle, and then we had to, when the numbers rose to over 9,000, we had to add Milton Middle as another prep site. And we had to make sure that we were always following the CDC guidelines. So that plan, and as you can see some of the pictures of the cooks and the volunteers and how we had our assembly lines as we packed the both breakfast and lunch, and the bus drivers would take these lunches out to the mini sites. And then we had school personnel as well as some volunteers helping us distribute each of these bag lunches. The next thing, the next thing that we wanted to look at was the instruction within the classroom. And how could we connect our students and teachers in this unprecedented times, or, we kind of, the crazy time that we kind of went into. So we immediately went into preparing resources on how parents could get the answers to their questions on how would remote learning look like, whether it was going to be through technology or through packets of information. We also set up some guidelines to teachers as far as we worked with the pediatrics to adolescents to determine what was an appropriate amount of time students should be online learning. And so we created this resource. It's called Cabell's Connected Classroom. It's on our website, and we're very proud as it was a very fluid document that we started with and actually completed before the State Department came out with their guidelines, and then we had to go back and add our guidelines. And as we all started out, as far as the grading process was a big issue in the form of what do we do with grades, and understanding trauma and how this was going to impact our kids, or more importantly, not understanding how this situation would impact our students. We follow the West Virginia Department of Ed suit of what we call no harm. So whatever the student's grade was for third next week, it could only be value added to their grade. This document is still, and it's ever evolving. It can be found on our website under the Student Family tab. Okay. Yeah, wait a minute. Go back a slide. Did I skip two? Okay, so then we're thinking, okay, broadband. Broadband is another issue. We had just purchased 10 Wi-Fi for buses to be placed on buses that we were very proud of. And then we purchased an additional 6 hotspots. So we were able to put up 16 different Wi-Fi hotspots at various locations where we knew people could get access to. Students could possibly walk to it, or parents could sit in a parking lot and gain the access. Then we made sure all the Wi-Fi at each of our school had access numbers, that we told parents how they could access the internet from the parking lot with a school access code. So we put that in place, and we were able to actually monitor exactly how many hits that we were getting. And as that data is not validated yet, it was used pretty widely. I actually had friends that would take pictures of cars by school buses and say, see, this is working. So then we go into the whole academic support, and we in Cabell County, we have just did a big technology initiative called our STEPS plan, to where we were putting iPads and teacher devices in every classroom, and we had just finished that at the beginning of the school year. To date, we have already deployed over 1,000 devices for our students to use during this time. Now, students that are still continuing with summer school, they will keep their device if needed. We have 9 academic specialists, pre-K-12, that work in the areas of math, reading, science, social studies, that provided ongoing professional development to support the remote learning. We had teachers that needed to know, we started a lot with Zooms, but we have Microsoft Office, so Teams, how do you do this? How do you conduct a Zoom meeting? How do you videotape a lesson that your kids could constantly watch it over as many times as possible? So we put in place a lot of support with our teachers and our principals to provide professional development, but also support for the remote learning. We partnered with West Virginia Department of Ed, Apple, Schoology, and they worked very closely, as they are vendors with us, to provide additional support for our teachers. And I actually had Apple, they created us a 6-week course solely to go with our iPad initiative, and we opened it up to 50 teachers. It booked in 32 minutes. One evening it was sent out, and in 32 42 minutes. We call it our sellout. So we'll be offering that same course every 6 weeks through the summer. So then it was very interesting to watch all this kind of come to play in the fact that all the many different ideas that teachers and principals started thinking about how they could connect to their students. We made a charge to all of our principals that every student had to be connected with verbally in some form, whether it was through online learning or through a phone call or through a face-to-face visit every week. And there were some struggles. We had some struggles, and Mr. Thomas will speak to that as he took that charge and led it for us. But it was very important to us that, you know, whether it was through the lunch line, some way we were accounting for every student to make sure that we were checking on them to see if they needed anything, and not only to provide, you know, their social and emotional well-being, but to see if they needed food, if they needed clothing. I'm very blessed with some great social workers and counselors. So they took that charge and they did full-fledged with that. So, but in the academic area, we started seeing science experiments on, you know, the teachers were doing these science experiments, and they were being shared not only across the county, but across the state. And, you know, once it hits YouTube, the response was pretty phenomenal. Principals started doing daily read alouds with their kids at the same time every day. I mean, I have 2 grandchildren in Florida, and, you know, I shared that with them and they were watching that. Musical performances, you know, we challenged the music teachers to be creative, and we had ensembles. You know, they would see what some of the stars would be doing on YouTube, and they created it with our kids. Talent shows, awards. It's just been a long list of things that our teachers and principals have worked collectively together to bring as much to our students of normalcy that they could, but also that need to really connect with the kids. So Mr. Thomas, he is over our student support section, and one of the first things that he wanted to do was get a form out to the students that they could complete to see what kind of needs. And I'm going to let him kind of address some of the things that they did.
Yeah, one of the things we discovered as we did some home visits as well as phone calls was that the kids needing some emotional support in a variety of ways. As soon as this hit, we were getting calls of attempted suicides, and so we wanted to try our best to get a grasp on that. So what we did, since we were providing online learning, we sent this form out through the platform that we're using for education. So each student could receive it and complete this form if they needed to speak to a counselor, a social worker, a school administrator, or a nurse. And we had quite a bit of response as we sent this out. The first week we had close to 15 to 20 kids send this form back with responses anywhere from loss of a family member to just feeling lonely. And it's been a good asset for our county, but that's one of the things we sent out. We actually shared that with Andrea Darr as well not too long ago. So I think some of you have seen this form, but it was one way of actually reaching the kids to make sure that they were taken care of.
And how many home visits did we have?
One of our first priorities before we even talked about education and making sure that the students were meeting their academic needs was to make sure that the students are taken care of. We're right in the middle of Huntington, West Virginia, which is a city school. There are a lot of city schools, and we also have a lot of rural schools out towards Milton and other places. There's a lot of problems within our areas, so we knew it was going to be a task to contact every kid every week. So we set up a system to where every homeroom teacher would contact their kid, thinking that would make most of the contacts. And that actually didn't work because many of you know that kids don't answer their phones, nor do parents all the time. So the system in place to address that was if the homeroom teacher could not contact or make contact with the student, that they would send those names and addresses or whatever situation it was to the student support office, and then we would take it from there. And that was either through home visits or other ways. And what we found out, the longer this went on, it was a prize for the county employees, because the longer it went on, we saw more people wanting to do home visits because they started missing the kids, and more people started volunteering to go on these home visits. We made our social workers and counselors alone made over 500 home visits in the past 6 weeks just to make contact with these kids. And a lot of good stories came from that, a lot of tears as they would go to the doors and the parents would hug and kiss and the kids would run out and all that. Just a lot of good stories, but many home visits were made to make sure that these kids were being contacted every week. Now, we have 12,000 kids. I would say roughly anywhere from 300 to 400 were not contacted each week, but before it was all over, every kid in our county was contacted at least 4 times, at least at a minimum 4 times during this COVID pandemic.
So, as you can see, our students were always our number one priority here in all forms. Then it kind of started branching out. Our health service started, health department started saying, hey, do you all have anything? So we went in to our schools and cleaned out for gloves, masks, and what we found was that we needed masks. So we had employees starting to make masks. We had employees starting to use our 3D printers to make face shields for the local hospitals and care activities. Everybody just is really connected totally. So it's my understanding that questions will be happening at the end. So as we could go on and on with this, I will turn it back to you, Andrea, and then we'll still be on for any questions at the end.
Thank you, Ms. Watts. It sounds like you rallied the troops really quickly and got them in place. You've done a wonderful job, and we can all learn a lot from you. So you're in Cabell County. I want to move us now up to Mon County in northern West Virginia, and I want to introduce you to Michelle Perozich. She's a student family outreach support specialist with Mon County Schools, the Alternative Education Program. And she is working in all the schools in all the high schools in Mon County. She is passionate about trauma-informed care and helping to improve the well-being of the individuals she serves. Michelle, can you tell us what you've been doing to this time to reach kids?
Yes. So I am one of 5, actually 6 outreach facilitators that cover, we have one in every elementary school. Each outreach facilitator covers 2 elementary schools. And then I am the only one at the high school right now. So I worked primarily with alternative education and the LEA Collaborative, which is our Options Pathway program. However, through the pandemic, it branched out, and I was working with families across all of the high schools, particularly if they had siblings and things like that across the county. We jumped right in and went at it. We have done a minimum between all of us 2 home visits a week between our lunch program and our pantry program to deliver food. That allowed us to deliver homework packets, Chromebook chargers, any paperwork that needed to get to families and those kind of things. We have done everything from connect families to resources like food stamps, the EBT information, updating their DHHR benefits, unemployment, our countywide MDIT and things like that. But if I could give anybody some strategies to kind of help them be most successful during this, is knowing your families and the students that you work with is extremely helpful. Knowing the challenges that they face, the barriers, from a trauma-informed perspective, if you know that family's fear response and the strengths of that family, then you can kind of work with them to get them where they need to be by building on strengths and giving them strategies right off the bat if you're that familiar with them. It was super important to realize what those barriers were, because it was things that you just don't think about that started to emerge. We jumped in with the food pantries, but those food pantry boxes varied week to week. And depending on what the family's needs were at that time, or their circumstances personally, we very quickly realized, like, hey, we need to spend some extra time with these families. For example, I had a younger mom that had never cooked beans before, and there was beans and cornbread things in one of the food boxes. So we did recipes. I have FaceTimed with my unaccompanied minors to teach them how to cook some of the things in the food boxes and stuff. Giving out recipes with things, helping parents download apps with their ingredients for their refrigerator so then they can kind of get creative, because we have a lot of picky students. You know, some of our pantry boxes were not necessarily specific to what kids like to eat sometimes. You know, if you have a child on the autism spectrum, they have favorite foods. That's a challenge, that's a barrier. So kind of helping families navigate that. Thinking outside the box was really important. We worked with our Safe Schools coordinator, Adam Hinkins. We used the food delivery program as a means to create that face-to-face contact. Schools and the staff across the county did a really good job of notifying our Safe Schools coordinator if they had not been able to contact that child or that parent. We then worked with our Adam Hinkins and use that as a means to go out and do a home visit to say, hey, haven't heard from anybody. How are things going? It has worked really, really well for us, especially there in the beginning, because our CPS and things like that didn't have the proper PPE to go out, and we were able to kind of do it from a distance on the porches when we're dropping off food and things like that to keep everything safe for everybody. I worked with just other community members to get donated phones for people, because a lot of people, even though they don't have access to Wi-Fi, at some point in the week, they're able to get to a point with Wi-Fi, whether it was a school parking lot, a business, a community organization. Xfinity had the free internet for families that we were able to use a lot of that. And that was helpful, or even hotspots on another family member's phone. So then we could put the apps for things that they needed on those cell phones before they were given. It was really, really good to also know that they had that 911 capability if there were to be an emergency or anything like that. The apps really have assisted in minimizing those barriers, especially with your special students that are receiving special education services. Parents were very stressed in the beginning, especially if they had younger children or students that have a low reading level. And so providing families and students that information was helpful. The math apps for parents, math can be extremely helpful. That was something else that we worked a lot with. And then Social Security has one, WIC has one, and things like that. So those were good when people were not able to go to those offices and work. We have worked really hard to build social connections and promote social equity with the families that we're working with. Whether it be giving them a name of someone at an agency that they can directly contact with. So it's like that warm handoff. So that way they're not as nervous. That was also helpful with the telehealth part. We have a lot of students that participate in mental health services in our schools. We have MOUs with several health agencies in our community. And when this started, there were forms that had to be signed and things that had to be done for those families to participate in telehealth. It was hard for families to navigate that at the beginning. So some of the things that we would do would actually be with the family for the first one to walk them through that process and teach them how to do it so then they could participate regularly with that. And then we worked with families to even get medications delivered to their home and stuff. The next thing that we have really focused on was promoting what was going on in the community. A lot of health practices. I used our class dojo with our students in alternative education. We have a class story. And so we were able to incorporate community announcements and things like that with them, as well as using Instagram and Twitter. I have a huge group on the Remind app, so I can push out information to families across the county that's just COVID announcements. Preventing crisis. Safety planning, family disaster planning. We've had storms that have knocked out electric. We have families, once it gets warm, that not all their utilities stay on. So helping families navigate that. Some families live in areas that regularly have contaminated water and boil water advisories. So making sure families have that as well. Educating everyone on the different things that are available. I've done a lot of phone calls at nights with grandparents who are caregivers. We have the Healthy Grand Families program in Mon County, so we have pretty close connections with a lot of those family members. And Schoology and Google Classroom and all those things were new to them. So I'd be screenshotting on a cell phone on my computer, sending it through a text to help them navigate that so they could know that their child had completed the schoolwork. And then just responding with empathy, because when all of this started, there was different information coming out every day, and helping people narrow down what are the safest and best places for me to get that information. Where can I go when I need something else? Learning the bus route to make sure that they can get to a lunch stop. And if they couldn't, then how can we set up the food program for them? One of the quotes that I heard that has really hit home with me was, we're all in the same storm, but we're not in the same boat. And just realizing that everyone is having an individual experience really hit home the first day of the pandemic. We went home on a Friday, and we had a student who went home and had found a parent that had overdosed and passed away. And so instantly meeting those needs, we have been able to house families during this pandemic. We have been able to furnish their houses. We live in a very awesome community that pitches in when this kind of stuff happens. And we've really focused on trying to minimize those barriers. And our county has been great about doing the communication a minimum of at least 3 times a week with our students. A lot of it has been every day though. Oh wait, I can't hear you, Andrea.
You have been very, very busy up there in Mon County reaching out to the kids, and we appreciate everything you've done. We're going to have to move on. We're getting a little bit behind time, but thank you so much. A lot of people learn great ways to connect with kids. We need to move to get Kevin Barney. Kevin, we asked Kevin to talk just really briefly about the kids that have fallen off the radar and how we can reach them. Kevin?
Morning, everybody. Basically, it follows through with what everybody's already been talking about. If you don't know what a PRO is, basically, it's called Prevention Resource Officers. We're placed in the schools. We're an offshoot of what used to be called SROs, or School Resource Officers. The biggest difference that used to be between us was that we facilitated classes and had one-on-ones with students. That's been a big difference for us. SROs are kind of changing up. They're training their officers to do the same thing that we do now. However, with what I've been doing in the schools and working with my kids, the kids knew me. They go home and tell their parents. The parents don't necessarily know who I am, but they've heard my name. So when this whole thing blew up, we were originally told that we were going to have a couple days to deal with our kids to get them ready to go school from home. And then about the same day or the next day, we got a phone call from the superintendent and said, tell your kids they're not coming back because the governor's closing schools. So where I live, it's very rural, so we have a lot of grandparents raising kids. We have limited internet for a lot of folks, so we had kids going home and no way to get a hold of them. So, and we had already had, thanks to Andrea, we actually already had Handle with Care in place, and that's been a big part to keep us moving forward because we already had kids on our radar that we were dealing with. So when I went to go check on those kids, I had counselors that knew how this worked. So I'd reach back to the counselors and say, hey, I checked on this one, and this one. And they said, oh, I just got a phone call from a teacher. They've been trying to reach this one child. Can you go check on this one too? And it kind of snowballed. Out of all the training we do for emergencies and how to do things, this is the one thing we were unprepared for. We had nothing in place to handle kids that didn't have access to internet, and we couldn't get a hold of them. We had several children that the parents were essential workers, so they went and stayed with other family. So my role as a PRO, when these things came out, basically I did a home check or a home visit, and we would check with the kids. I got a lot of eyes on kids to make sure they were okay, there was no issues, and most of the time, thank goodness, it turned out that either there was an internet problem, there was a family issue where grandparents were raising the kids and they were not familiar with how to use a computer, so that that was becoming an issue. So when the teachers were trying to get a hold of the kids, the grandparents had no clue what to do. So we assisted them in getting those contacts with it, or to get them talking to the teachers. And then when the superintendent found out what we were doing at the high school, then she put it out to all the principals, hey, tell your teachers if they can't get a hold of the kids, give it to the counselors, let the counselors try a couple times. And then ultimately it came to me, and then I would go out and knock on the door and see what was going on. And like I said, in our case, thank goodness, most of them turned out to be no issues. It was just an internet problem, or they just didn't know how to communicate. But we addressed all those issues. We did some food drops for families that were having transportation issues. We were able to get educational packs to the kids that didn't have internet access that we weren't aware about. So we got them those packets. Through the summer, we're going to continue giving out food. We've gotten them on our food list so that we make sure they're getting things for the kids. We had some kids, excuse me, come to our county from other places. So we're even providing, we're identifying those children and helping feed those kids as well. So in essence, basically, everybody's attacking things in different ways. The PRO position allows me to go out into the general public and knock on doors, so we're not having teachers go out and do it. And we have a central location for all the information. The one thing I can improve on, which I critique myself all the time for how we can improve things, is my communication back to the counselors. Teachers would call in, give it to the counselor gave it to me, and I was just running so much that I wasn't communicating back to them fast enough that, hey, I found this child, everything's okay. The couple that I did have issues with, I did call the counselor immediately and say, hey, we got a problem, and we figured out what we needed to do to correct it. The other ones just took too long, so I need to work on that communication. But again, this is the one thing that we never expected, we never planned for. All the plans we have in place and nothing to cover this. It's going to be a long summer because we're doing multiple things to try to contact these kids. And basically the program, we're going to extend it into our PRO training when we have our conference, which may not happen this year, but we're going to get it out to all the PROs, which if in West Virginia we have 101 PROs in the state to work with the schools. So some of the schools didn't even know they could use their PROs for that. So we're going to expand on that too. And Andrea, I know we're going over, so I'll cut it short there unless you had any questions.
Thank you, Kevin. And we appreciate your work and all the work of the PROs. Please, in your communities, meet your PROs, reach out to them. They do awesome work. Thanks, Kevin. We're going to move on now to connecting with kids and with virtual mental health services with Felicia Bush. She's the Executive Director of Harmony Mental Health. Felicia, can you spend just a few minutes and let us know what you're doing at Harmony to connect children with mental health services virtually? Can't hear you, Felicia. You need to take your mute off.
Sorry about that.
You.
Okay. Hold just a second. I'm going to share my screen. You're going to have to wait. Okay. Hello, everyone. I am the Executive Director of Harmony Mental Health, and we're a mental health and social service agency, and we have offices in 6 counties, and we do school-based mental health services in most of those counties. As a result, prior to COVID, the way that we kind of did business was, I think, the way most people do. We went into the school. In some counties, we had dedicated offices and dedicated hours that we were in the schools. And so we provided services pre-COVID. We did individual school-based therapy and then individual safe and supportive services. And those are services done by people who are not therapists. They're supportive counselors, and they support the work of the therapist, and they also are able to interact with students who are part of the school population. The way that we provided those services in school was in person via telehealth. But telehealth was on a limited basis and usually based on just accessibility issues, or if a therapist was sick or a child was sick, whatever. But mostly it was in school. The location of the school-based services were usually in the school-based therapy office, in a Harmony office. We had, for high school, some of our counties, our office is very close to high school. We have walkover. So kids could sign out at the office, walk over for their therapy session and walk back. And during that time, the collateral connections we were able to make in order to address issues with children, talk about strategies and et cetera with teachers and staff, and talk about progress, we did those in person with teachers and staff. And we did email updates. We attended, different meetings, IEPs and et cetera. And then we communicated with parents mainly during emails, monthly emails or phone updates. So we would send parents an update on this is kind of what we're working with on your child. Parents, if they had a real concern, would reach out, but they did very little of that. The child was receiving services in school. So then you have COVID and the closure of schools, and we have to do everything differently. We serve about 375 kids a week. And so we have many therapists who are dedicated to that service. So we had to kind of quickly respond and make sure we continued the mental health services that we were providing. So post COVID-19, our services are still individual therapy, but they also include family therapy. And so having access to the family in the home has been a real boon for us, particularly those of us who work with small children. We're able to see how the family interacts with each other and involve the family in the therapy process. Our safe and supportive counselors have provided safe and supportive services by continuing to contact the school student, the client, and they've also offered respite. As social distancing has eased up a little bit, we had started bringing kids into our office, one at a time, to spend a couple of hours with a supportive counselor and have some respite for both the parent and the child. And they were able to then meet with their therapist via telehealth and work on some specific objectives. The modality is primarily telehealth, and as this week was we begin to open up, then socially distant in person. And you have to meet an exception in order to be able to be seen in office. The location, however, is very different than normal. We meet in bedrooms and kitchens and porches and cars, and for respite, we meet at the Harmony office. Our collateral connections, we're still talking about issues and strategies and progress with teachers and staff. We do email updates, and we do a shared database, and I'll show you an example of that, so that they can log on and see what kind of participation is happening with that child. And we are seeing parents via telehealth and continue to talk to them via phone and email. When this first happened, we needed to make quick contact with all of our current students. And so the first thing that our staff did was to determine, who's ready and willing to do telehealth, because that was the only way that we could continue services. And so we had to find out, first of all, if they were, as far as readiness was concerned, are they willing to participate in these services? And some people said, we'll wait until COVID is over and we go back to school in a couple of weeks, right? We'll just wait for school. And then as that went along, they realized that this school is not going to be the answer. And, mental health issues don't go on hold because there's a break. So if you have an active mental health issue in need of treatment, then we're required to have a consistent treatment. So also, if they're ready, we want to make sure that they have that means that they have a private confidential location to meet. To get them set, we had to solve a lot of problems, internet and hotspot issues being amongst them, and has been talked about a lot. Getting them access to smartphones, computers, and tablets. And then making sure that if they're ready to go, that they understand how to access. This has probably been the biggest challenge after we got the devices, is helping people like me who are not technology enhanced be able to access client portals and do consents and things like that online. That's been pretty challenging, but now when they get the hang of it, then they got it and they're good to go. The challenges to making this change has been parent buy-in, convincing the parent that this is a good thing, the internet access to technology, family dysfunction. If the family, you know your families, you know that there's could be abuse going on, could be safety issues going on. You could just have parents who are just disinterested in being part of the process, and that's something that we have really worked hard to overcome and engage. It's easier to engage parents when you come at from the perspective of trying to help their children succeed and to succeed in school. The opportunities that we have found is parent support. The parents have felt more supported by their school, who they often are embattled with, or they feel like the school is out to get them in some way or challenging them, and so the school has been a bridge to, in our counties, to the internet. They've provided hotspots. They've ordered, in some counties, ordered phones, smartphones to take to people, provided iPads and allowed them to have access to their computer that they utilize in school. So just going out and making sure that they had access to their therapy by bridging that gap with technology. And by doing that, that's also has increased the trust between home and school. And with our families, that's very important. The other opportunity is, like I mentioned before, we have that family unit that we can do therapy with. And you know, children only have the capacity to change. They can try to change themselves, but it has to be supported by their environment. So having access to that family is critical for us to be able to sustain change with children. It gives us the opportunity to observe, to assess and refer. And that's from basic needs that they might have to scanning the environment for danger. We had a situation where a child, like I said, having therapy in a private area is a requirement for HIPAA. We must have a private area. So we normally will start a session with the parent at the beginning. They're setting their child up. We can talk to them for a few minutes, and then we bring them back at the end of the session to schedule the next session, kind of review things. But in a couple of instances, our therapists have noted that, the child's staying in an area, they're not moving, and they would like glance off. And it was obvious that someone was in the room. And we had one situation where, so we will then ask the child to scan the area with their device and move to a private area. And in one situation, the father had this huge bong on the table that his child, scanned, and he freaked out. It was pretty hysterical. And I'm sure he thought CPS would come storming the doors. But, what they also noticed is that bong was sitting on a table outside of reach, outside of the child's reach. It was a young child. Breakfast was on the breakfast bar. The child was being taken care of. And we all have our coping mechanisms. So, but having access to that family in their own environment has been just such a valuable tool. As far as our safe and supportive connection, what they do is they check up. And so as they make initial contact with families, they do COVID-19 screening questions, they do family mental health screeners, family self-care assessments, and family needs assessments. And then they set up, they help by setting up device delivery, they set up appointments for therapy, and they set up those respite appointments. And they do their own supportive counseling as well. And then they follow up. So they have consistent client contact on at least a bi-weekly basis. And they refer as necessary, and they report as necessary. And one of the other ways, the ways that this has become successful for us is that we have had to find creative ways to work with clients. So we have mailed out care packages. We have our supportive counselors deliver packages. So if I'm going to work on a project with a family, then I want to make sure they have all the materials they need to do that. And so I'll either mail it ahead of time, or I will have it delivered to them if they don't have the ability to go out and buy those materials. We use different types of techniques to engage the family, and different types of therapeutic techniques, because you've got to keep those young folks engaged. So from doing yoga with them to doing online interactive games that they can participate in and we can do together. And you know, we have 1,000 examples of those types of innovations, and you know, my therapists are brilliant in coming up, just like teachers. They're very creative folks. And then I think the most important thing that we do is that we maintain our school connections. That just because the kids aren't physically in the school building, we maintain those connections. So this is just an example of one of our schools. And this is a school that we only began services post-COVID. We actually signed our contract, and an hour later, the governor closed schools. So this is an example of one of those schools, and the referrals that they've made. Of course, the name is blacked out, but this is our client ID number, the student ID number, the age, whether they're active, which means they're actively being seen for therapy. If it says pending, it means that they have an intake that's scheduled. And then what the referral source is. If you know, we can't talk to the school if the referral source was themselves and they haven't signed a release to the school. So it's important that we are certain that if they're on this database, that we're permitted to share information. And then we just have notes about what's going on. And then we have folks that, you know, wanted to wait until COVID ends, et cetera. So you see down at the bottom of the database. But it's important for school staff to know what's happening with those referrals that they made. And because everyone is busy, and you know, we have never been busier, they're able to just get on a shared database and look and see for themselves, and then ask follow-up questions. So,
Felicia, telehealth has turned out to be a rock star in this whole thing, hasn't it? I believe
really
you told me you have been able to keep up with 70% of your school-based clients.
Yes,
Which
absolutely.
is incredible. So you're doing great work connected with them. Thank you so much. If you could unshare your screen, we've got 2 more presentations in just a few minutes. Our next one is Ashley Way Frankhauser from Wood County. She's the FRN up there. Ashley, can you tell us about what kind of calls you're getting at the FRN?
Yeah, hi everybody. So our needs here are probably kind of similar across the state, but for those who aren't familiar, FRNs, we don't provide direct services, so we help connect the community to the services that they need, but we also help connect agencies to each other and agencies to the community. So we really serve as those bridges in the community to kind of help network everybody together. One of the ways that we always reach out to the community is our community resource guides, and every county is responsible for maintaining these throughout the year. We update them every winter, so luckily ours was well timed. We updated that in January and February, and we were able to, so far we've distributed over 3,000 copies throughout our community. So those are available in every county on our statewide website, which is www.wvfrn.org. So if you're not partnered already with your FRNs, please reach out to them and let them know how they can help you with the work that you are doing. In the early days, the biggest need obviously was food, but it wasn't necessarily due to unemployment or anything. It was just like a kind of a supply chain issue. So we saw a lot of new folks, and we saw a lot of people that weren't familiar with services, how to obtain them, even what was available to them. So we saw a big surge kind of in that more working class family. A lot of service workers lost their jobs pretty kind of quickly right off the bat there. They weren't familiar with SNAP or how to apply for SNAP or even what it was. A lot of people needed to apply for unemployment and didn't even know what agency in West Virginia could help that with them. So we were helping a lot of new people reach services that they weren't familiar with. But I will say that food is something that Wood County does really well. We're rock stars here with Hunger Solutions. We have 32 community-based and school-based food pantries available, and almost all of those continue to operate during the pandemic. We've seen lots of community food drives. The community always comes out in droves to help with that.
So there really wasn't a short supply in very many food banks. And Wood County Schools has been awesome at feeding kids. They do nearly 20,000 food boxes a week at 14 different school and community sites. And they are going to continue with summer feeding. So they're, from my understanding, they're looking for private organizations to kind of take that over, since it has been the teaching staff that has been that volunteer base for that. So if anybody here in Wood County is out there on this call and you're a private organization and you're interested in kind of taking that over for the summer, either reach out to me and I can connect you to the schools, or reach out to them directly. We also had a lot of people in March that were really afraid of rent and utility assistance. They had no idea what they were going to do if they couldn't make their rent, if they couldn't pay their utilities. There was kind of a patchwork thing of things going on. Some companies were going through with shutoffs, some weren't. So we were staying up to date on that information so that we could relay that to the people that were contacting us. And we were able to connect them with the programs that provide that resource, like on an average basis throughout the regular year. And then we've also had a lot of emergency relief aid programs that have popped up due to this pandemic, and we've been able to connect people with those emergency resources as well. So that's also been a blessing. Also a lot of like young parents, single parents, those baby care items, again, like supply chain issues and pricing, inflated prices after that. So we've had a lot of referrals for diapers and baby wipes and things like that. And then also FRNs throughout the year, we just, you know, we really focus on that family well-being aspect. So we try to, most of us are partners with our Partners in Prevention team. So we try to do a lot of prevention for child maltreatment. So we've really had to change our messaging because we're so used to being these like boots on the ground community organizations that partner with everybody and reach families and individuals through our events. And with this isolation period, it's been kind of challenging. So we've had to try to find out-of-box solutions, sort of that creative thinking. And I feel like Wood County's done really well with that as well. Social media is obviously a tool for everybody, but then we worry about access to it. So we promoted those Wi-Fi hotspots throughout the county, which I know that other counties have been doing those as well. So we've had those to utilize. We've also utilized our little free libraries and the blessing boxes here in Wood County. I don't know if other counties have those. We have 15 here in our county. It's a good way because they're in lots of different neighborhoods. So people come to those for different items. Like we've left hygiene items in ours and lots of outreach and messaging, education, public health things from the CDC and the health department, how to stay healthy. Some have left like kids activities in theirs, crayons, school supplies, coloring books, academic resources, things that support remote learning. So those are good outreach efforts. And also our food banks. I kind of want to give a shout out to one of our local food banks here in particular called the Midtown Family Resource Center. They're also one of those partners in prevention. And they've done an awesome job of targeting their area, which is sort of one of our more vulnerable areas here in Parkersburg. And they actually did, they made little coupons and put them in the food boxes that went out with Wood County school students from the McKinley school area neighborhood. And the coupons were good to come back to the food bank to get family food boxes every week. And they did themes over there. So they had like a breakfast box one week that had pancake mix and sausage and milk and butter and things like that. But then they also do messaging through it as well. So we were partnered with them for a Healthy Living on a Budget workshop series for all of May, which unfortunately had to be canceled. So we hate that because this would have been our third year for that. So instead of just scrapping it all together, we still kind of wanted to reach that, that audience. And so in a couple of different food boxes, we put in how to do like container gardening at home, how to do healthier eating, even if you're using like food pantry items and things like that. And there were some seed packets in there and how to grow those at home. So we still tried to get that education out there through that as well.
Ashley, we're almost out of time. I hate to interrupt you. If you could just wind it up real quick. We still have one more person to talk, please.
Okay, I'll just end it there then.
Ashley, they can get a hold of you just by Googling. How did they get a hold of all the FRNs in West Virginia?
All of our contact information is on the website. So again, it's www.wvfrn.org.
Okay, thank you so much, Ashley. And thanks for reaching out to all those families and answering all those questions and getting them the resources. We're going to move now to Barry Ball. Barry is the faith-based representative on our Children's Justice Task Force, and he's going to talk to us about how they're addressing social distancing while staying socially connected.
So when all of this hit, all of our pastors who had been trained to stand behind the pulpit and shake hands with folks and hug folks had to learn how to become videographers and do things online. And all of that changed. And with all that change came a lot of neat opportunities where folks were making contact that they hadn't heard from some time. What we have been doing in the United Methodist Church and also working with the West Virginia Council of Churches is sending out reminders and creative ideas of how to connect with the community at large. Part of that is through their working with the United Way, provided free 211 signs for the Clearinghouse for Social Services. We're hoping that churches will go out and get those from the United Way, place them in their churchyards, place them especially around where they have food pantry entrances and exits, for folks to be reminded that there's help. Nobody's alone in this process. What we've been doing is just reminding churches that they are mandatory reporters, that they need to keep their eyes open when they do phone calls to families, to take time to talk to the children that are in the house. We're doing Sunday school lessons by video and even planning summer camps by video, which I don't understand yet, but I want to see that. But staying in contact with all these families and reaching out to the community, that's a little bit larger. There you go, Andrea.
You did a great job, Barry. You always do. We appreciate you so much. I know this has been a lot of information, and I've sort of been pushing it and rushing it, but I'm trying to get everybody in, and everyone has done such a great job. But the last thing I want to end with is to talk briefly about the new face of the mandated reporter. The CPS system, which is there for support and for safety for kids, operates when children are interacting with people and they're in school and they're in society. Social distancing is changing that, and we're not seeing the kids. The new face of the mandated reporter, it's the convenience store worker who sees that family coming in for a soda or whatever. It's the gas station attendant. It's the postman. And a lot of those people really don't have a clear understanding about abuse and what needs to be reported. So I think you can see on your screen, we've created this flyer. Everyone in our community can help protect kids. It shows signs and symptoms. Sometimes it shows demeanor and behavior appearance that might be red flag, but it shows risk factors for families and helpful information that you need when reporting. This flyer, as well as a bunch of resources from Michelle on working with kids, is Melody, you're going to have to help me with this. I think it's in the chat box, but if you could get this flyer printed off, take it to your convenience stores, take it out there in community, help people understand that there are families that do need some support and that we need to reach out and help them. And a great way to do that is to call CPS. So we briefly have just a few minutes for a couple of questions. I know someone wanted more information on setting up those Wi-Fi spots. Let me see. Keith, can you address that, or Ms. Or the assistant superintendent there, Ms. Balls, how you set up those hot spots?
We actually, they did have to have internet access points to be able to set them up. So what we did, we looked at some of our most challenging areas, such as where our low income housing was, and we've set them up there. where we knew that devices were being deployed and students just needed the internet. We looked at that data that we were collecting, and then we went along what we call our ridges and looked at church parking lots to determine where a safe place could be to park a school bus or to put a hotspot in the church. So people did not at least have to travel so far to gain access to the internet.
So did I guess your technology people figured out how to outfit those buses?
Yes.
And so if they have any more questions, can they reach out to you and talk to you? Could you give them some sort of email?
Yeah, so I can forward them to Mr. Jackson, our technology director, because he was in charge of that initiative.
Okay, so whoever had that question, contact Mr. Jackson in Cabell County. Michelle, could you really briefly tell them what's on your list of resources? You'll have to unmute yourself, Michelle.
Yes. So what I did was I was having so many questions across the whole thing that I put together. It's a Google Drive folder. It has a folder for each stakeholder. So there's one for teachers, parents. There's one for educators that has all the resources from the West Virginia Department of Ed website. There are local like flyers and things like that from health departments, but every one of them has a different folder. Everyone has access to them. They include West Virginia Department of Ed, teachers and students, social workers and counselors, parents, Montague County specific resources, mental health resources, emergency planning, documentation. And I also have one that's just specific to COVID-19. So there's, I had a lot of questions from family members that I was working with that just about health things related to the CDC and guidelines with CDC. I have stuff on how to clean your groceries, how to make a mask, like simple things that break it down. And then of course, like state resources as well.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. That's awesome. I hope y'all enjoyed this little town hall meeting. I hope you learned a lot of things that you can take back to your community and use to connect with these kids in hard places. Please, please talk to your local law enforcement. Ask them to continue to send those handle with care notices. And any place you can put that flyer out, we would really appreciate you printing and posting those flyers, because we really need to connect with all these kids in hard places. If anyone has any interest in joining us on our big brainstorming session, it's sort of a version of what you saw here, just email me. My contact information is on handlewithcare@wv.org, and we'll include you in that brainstorming session we have every other Wednesday. So it's a week from now, we'll have it at 3 in the afternoon. So just contact me if you're interested. Please continue to participate in the series. You're going to have great information, and take care of yourself and take care of your kids. Thank you.